Well, good morning, everybody, or afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Jake Milstein, and I work at Critical Insight. And we're here for a webinar and discussion today about who's attacking you. This is a question that comes up a lot. In fact, I was on a call with a rural hospital and was talking to somebody there, not in the IT department, one of the executives, and one of their questions was, you know, I read all this stuff. Is Russia really coming after our small rural hospital? Like, why does Russia care about my small rural hospital? And so, we put this together today to talk about, when somebody comes after your organization, and it happens every day. I mean, we know this, right? There are attacks every day. A phishing email is an attack. Who's attacking you? What do they want? And does it matter? And so we put this together today to talk about it. We have some great folks here who put this presentation together. And as folks come into the room, just want to say hi. See some familiar folks in the chat there. And so a reminder: on the right is a chat, and we answer questions as we go. My favorite thing to do is to interrupt the panelists and ask questions. So please put questions in the chat. Put your points in the chat. We'll talk about what you say. Also, if you don't like the chat, there's a little bell at the top of the chat, and you can mute the chat if it's going boop boop boop, and you want it to go away. You can make it go away. You can also mute me too by muting your computer. No, I'm just kidding.
How does it go? What's the noise it makes?
That's right. That's a good question. Also, one of the questions we get all the time is, will you get a recording to this? Yes, you will get a recording to this. Anybody who registered will get an automatic recording to this. We will also put it on our YouTube channel. And so if you want to share it throughout your organization, you want to share it with somebody else, you can grab the YouTube link, because the link that comes from the webinar platform is not a shareable link. And we're happy to get that to you. Just go ahead and email us. My email address is jake@criticalinsight.com. And I'm happy to get it to you. Anyway, so in the chat, let us know where you're joining from, and we'll get going here. So if you've never met us before, Critical Insight defends critical services against cyber attacks. And that means that we provide SOC coverage 24/7. That means that we provide preparation for an event with IR plans and the like. We detect attacks, and we help people respond to attacks. And I want to be really clear, we don't ever want to meet anybody with a 3 a.m. call. We'd love to meet you before that so we can help you prepare for an attack, detect an attack, and not just be there when you need to respond to an attack. The panelists today are Mike, Brad, and me. Mike, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Mike Hamilton, and the job that I do for Critical Insight is, I guess, fourfold. I am the Chief of Information Security for the company. I do a few consulting engagements for select customers. I help to operate the Pisces nonprofit, and I basically report to Jake as one of his talking heads. Thank you.
Brad.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming to the panel today. My name is Brad Swanson. I work here at Critical Insight as a VCSO for our small and medium business customers. Basically, what that means is if we have a customer that maybe doesn't have a need or the budget for a full-time CISO, they bring in somebody like me. I provide CISO services to them, help guide them, and keep them on a good path forward. I also do some SME work and some audit prep work, ISO, SOC 2, things like that. Have been a manager for threat intelligence and incident response in a past life for some larger companies. Done security for about 27 years, and happy to be part of the Critical Insight family.
Awesome. And again, I'm Jake Milstein. I run all of the events. And yes, my email address, jake@criticalinsight.com. And keep the chat coming. If you have questions, let me know throughout this. Okay, so today, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the headlines, because we are in that business where We find out about things in the news. Our bosses find out about things in the news. Our elected leaders find out about things in the news. And so one of the things that's important is that when we be able to read the headlines, that we be able to read the news and really have a deep understanding of what's going on. And so we're going to look at some headlines in that context. And then we're going to look through an inventory of threat actors, nation states, criminal gangs, and what they want. We're going to have slides where the top is who the threat actor is, and the bottom is going to be what they do, and then tactics to watch for, and then we'll talk in the end about what to do about each one. And we say Q&A is at the end, which to me is always funny because we just interrupt folks and do questions as we go, but we'll also have time for questions at the end. With that, here are the headlines. The first one. So when we planned this webinar, we did not know that this was going to come out last week. So Lloyd's of London, which is an insurance carrier, says that they are going to exclude catastrophic nation-backed cyber attacks from insurance coverage. Presumably, Mike saying that if you have a ransomware attack, and your insurance company can prove that it was Russia behind it, they're not going to pay.
This is true. And as Lloyd's goes, so goes the insurance industry. And so it's only a question of time before this, it may be challenged in courts. Frankly, we don't know, but this is what Lloyd's is saying. And as you will see, as we go through this inventory, this taxonomy of threat actors, there's a whole lot of confusion over, what is nation state involvement here? And so the leverage that insurance companies have and the ability for them to go, yeah, you know what, we think there was nation state involved. Are they going to be required to do absolute attribution? I doubt that. Moving on to a few more of these, Google finding these hack for hire groups, right? The rise of mercenaries. There is an absolute gig economy being developed that looks pretty strong at this point, and it's only growing. And we'll talk about that. Hacktivism and DDoS attacks. So Jake and I, we talk once a week and, do our little LinkedIn Live thing. And for the last 2 years, we've been tracking this, hacktivism thing. And as the war started in Ukraine and a lot of volunteers jumped on and said, hey, we'll sit here in the United States and hack Russia, no problem. Given the success that they have had, they are emboldened. And what we will see is there are a lot of social, environmental, and now political causes that people are hacking for. And we're coming up to elections, and this is something to watch. And there's an example of it right there. Hacktivism against states grows after overturn of Roe versus Wade. I don't feel surprised at that myself, given, the previous statement about political hackery going on. The ease with which these actors can access tools and really sophisticated techniques, that bar has really been lowered. Anonymous and Russia, again, that the hacktivism, they've hit websites, they've broken into the propaganda ministry, they've taken over television stations to broadcast their own messages, they hit the space agency, they overpressurized a gas line that could have caused loss of life. So, the potential for blowback there is absolutely something that we need to track. Vlad is a little ticked off that this has been going on, and there are volunteer activist hackers in Russia as well. In fact, they have a name, it's Killnet. And then finally, the mercenaries, this whole gig economy, and we'll talk more about this too. I won't say too much about it right now. Brad, you want to follow up on any of this? I'm sure none of this is surprising to you.
Yeah, no. And actually, kind of going back to the Lloyd's thing, we've seen this in the past. It was always kind of a gray area, though. There was an insurance company that denied a claim. They claimed that there was a clause in the policy that they would not cover acts of war. And there was a cyber attack that came from a nation state. They denied that policy and said, oh, well, that's an act of war. Again, it was a very gray area at the time. So I think this move by Lloyd's is simply making it more clear, more solidified, something that will hold up for them in court if it comes to that. Um, I agree that we're seeing a very large rise in hacktivism. We saw it back with Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. There are a lot of cyber attacks that take place as a result, and it seems to grow as more and more socio-political events take place. We're seeing more and more folks kind of getting on that hacking bandwagon. We're going to dox people. We're going to pull data. We're going to do denial of service, things like that. So yeah, I think these headlines are very, very pertinent and very current for us. So
Great.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It's groups of activists. It's also, vigilantes, right? There's a lot of that going on. I put those in the same group, but that's a little bit different. That's
Yeah.
a good distinction.
And so we've talked about those different groups here. Now we're going to go group by group and talk about each one. And we're going to start with the criminals of opportunity.
Okay, so we've always had what we called script kiddies. I mean, people that really didn't have any skills, but you could get a hold of, a tool. Well, the tools are now really sophisticated. They're really easy to obtain. Some of these have implemented nation state level techniques in them. The big thing is these people are curious. These are the kind of people that we hire. Actually, when we hire people as analysts, we say, we care less about your degree and certification than we do about your curiosity and what kind of a network you have at home, what kind of experiments you do. Well, these experiments can bleed over into this dark side, right? So, one manifestation of this are the DDoS tools that are out there. And these got really popular when the conflict started occurring in Ukraine, where anybody could sign on to a way of using an app on your phone to point at some target in Russia and just send packets to it from your phone. And you get enough people doing this, that becomes this giant distributed denial of service attack, and it's effective. And so everybody that wants to kind of, we want to be cyber, I want to be in cybersecurity, they're dipping their toe into their water doing this. Again, these are unsophisticated criminals of opportunity. And let's talk about this Oldsmar water utility. And I'm interested, Brad, in whether you have any different opinion than me, but the way that this went down, a poorly protected remote access service facing the internet was attacked by someone that either guessed the password or was in possession of the password. This person gained access to the control application and raised the level of sodium hydroxide being mixed in the drinking water. Okay. It stopped. An operator got it. And, this may sound terrifying on the face of it, but details surrounding the event suggest that this was not a terrorist, a criminal, or a state-sponsored actor. This was a person that found that exposure, logged in, played around with an application they didn't understand, and then fled. Okay. That was an unsophisticated criminal of opportunity. That was a doofus. Okay?
And Brad, before you answer that one, some more of the background on that one. It happened right before the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl was in Tampa. Oldsmar is a suburb of Tampa, and so it felt like, oh my gosh, this is terrorism.
Yeah, for sure. And it's attribution. It's always very easy to have a preconceived notion at the beginning of an event. When you actually look at the evidence, then it helps with that attribution. A lot of people, but when I was young, we would get things and play with it to see how it worked. Sometimes people will do that with things like viruses and malware, and they might not have an intent of it to get away, but it does. They somehow infect their own machine. Now everybody on their mailing list is infected or being sent this virus. A lot of people, they just want to explore, and that's what this was. Even though it looked terrifying, in the very beginning, once it was found out that it was not a terrorist attack, people breathed a little easier. But some of us, it kept us up, because if a random script kiddie, if you will, can get into a water treatment facility and do things like this, what can a nation state do? So, I mean, this is totally preventable had there been proper security controls around that system. It may have been, it may have not even made the news, might not have even happened. But if it was that easy for somebody with a low skill set to get in, what does that mean for the people that are much more talented? It just makes it very easy for them.
Yeah. Well, these low end actors, right? I mean, they're doing denial of service. They do some website defacement. They can potentially disrupt things. If that Oldsmar thing had gone any further, that would have been pretty disruptive.
Mhm.
They don't really have an objective here. And in that particular Oldsmar case, that they exploited a configuration mistake. You had a crappy password on your remote access or no password or something like that. So, the tools, techniques, procedures that they use are pretty primitive. And so when we get to the end here, we'll talk about, I'm not going to spend a lot on TTPs and things like this, but we'll enumerate what are kind of the TTPs used by these different groups and then talk about if you think you're being targeted by this group, or if you have this thing that this group wants, here's what they're likely to do. And so here's what you should do. So that's where we'll land on this. Go ahead and go to the next slide,
Well,
Jake.
before I do, Mike, in the no real intent here, I mean, some of them have intent, some of them don't. I mean, some of them, right? I mean,
You're going to be able to shave off round off error on every statement I make, Jake.
all right. Organized crime, cyber gangs. And we talk about this one a lot as it relates to ransomware and hospitals and cities and counties because of the Russian cyber gangs.
Yep. This used to be just irritating. This is an epidemic now. So much money is being lost, and I just don't know how aware people are. The biggest source of loss is not ransomware. It is business email compromise. It's tricking someone into sending money to the wrong place, right? You can always rely on the gullibility of the users to facilitate criminal activity. Setting that aside, they have matured and their tools are incredibly sophisticated now. They have tools that rival those of nation states, right? And these APT, Advanced Persistent Threat Groups, they do this now. They are absolutely run like a corporation. They have affiliates and divisions, and they'll have a business partner over there that does the initial access. They will have another one that develops the payload. They will have another one that runs the command and control infrastructure, and they're outsourcing to these various specialties. Okay. So it's not just, hey, bunch of dudes in a basement doing this. It's not. And again, this is morphing right now into this gig economy where lots of contractors can get into this. So you can just do piecework. And, I think this has been exacerbated somewhat by what it's like to work in cybersecurity, right? You're getting your behind handed to you all the time. You always think we're losing. Nobody wants to be on a losing team. So, Brad, any follow up on that?
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. The thing that keeps these cyber gangs growing is that it is not a very heavy lift for a decent payday. They send out a bunch of emails, and all that has to happen is one person falls for it, and they've made money. So we need to consistently be on our guard. It gets tiring, to always be on the watch, and all it takes is one person to let their guard down for a minute, and this group has made money. It's something that I think is going to grow even more in the coming years.
Yeah, and it's this affiliate business too, and ransomware as a service, and these other initial access as a service. This has just made it so that anybody, and my fear is political actors, not necessarily elected representatives, but people that want an election to go one way or another, can pull these tools off a shelf now, not have any idea how they work, and make them work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
And
you had a
hey, Brad, a question came up in the chat here that I just want to, which is, what is a gig economy? It has nothing to do with gigabit, and everything to do with people taking gig jobs.
it's
Like I'll have this
piecework.
Yep.
gig or I'll have that gig, kind of the
Mhm.
word gig. And so that's like Uber drivers or somebody delivering your pizza or any of
Free,
those kind
yeah,
of like
Organized crime command and control.
yeah,
or working for organized crime. That's
yeah.
right.
Freelance web developers. That was one of the
Mhm.
earlier gig economy roles. When the web came out, and they started putting pictures on it, everybody wanted a web designer, and that became a gig thing. You'd work your 9 to 5, and then in the evening, a couple hours doing web design, and it's really blown into its own kind of, well, economy, for lack of a better word. But a lot of people are doing that. A lot of people are just kind of doing contracting in a matter of speaking, and kind of fulfilling that gig economy.
Yeah, right. Junior Flores, TaskRabbit, TaskRabbit. That's kind of what it is.
I don't know. I like Michael's answer or elected position.
Yeah,
The
he's heckling me.
I know. I'm sure that he is. School board. I don't know. Whatever. So when we think about these cyber gangs, I mean, this. I mean, we've seen real growth here. Sadly, I mean, we've seen the number of gangs just explode. We've seen Mike, all sorts of gangs, come and go. They pretend like they're going away and then they just reform. And when they
Yeah,
reform, it's like one gang reforms into three.
they're not going to go anywhere. They're making too much money.
And
It's
now with the whole as a service thing, now they have all of their foot soldiers, if you will. If you look at it from like mob perspective, they have all these script kiddies or lower level actors now doing all the dirty work. They're out the boots on the ground, getting this ransomware into networks, and then the cyber gangs just sit back and collect that percentage. So it's reducing the amount of risk to them personally. It's increasing their spread, increasing their income. Why wouldn't you start a cyber gang? That's it's profit for them. So
let's not encourage anyone to do that.
So do
well,
we
yeah,
know?
don't.
So do we know how big some of these cyber gangs are? Like how many people are in them, and like how much they make? I mean, we talk about them as like mini businesses, but I mean, do we know any of that, Mike?
I don't personally know any of that. I think that the Mandiants of the world and frankly the federal government and the intelligence community does. This is how they can do this attribution right down to the person, right? DOJ is now fingering people, arresting them, extraditing them, and prosecuting them. And so they're able to dig in pretty far. My sense is that the top levels of these gangs are not very many people. But as you say, Brad, there's a distributed organization underneath with capos, foot soldiers, right? I mean, it is very mob like. So I think overall the organization is big, but at the top, what you would call the C suite is pretty small. And if we don't hurry up, we're not going to get through all this.
Okay, next slide. Insiders.
Okay, insiders, always been a problem. But now they are being actively recruited and bribed, especially by this Lapsus gang right here. And in fact, the T-Mobile event that just occurred, Lapsus actually was getting people on the inside to do things. And in fact, there was, I think, Brad, it was SIM swapping that they were had people engage in so that they could take over people's phones specifically for the purpose of stealing their crypto wallets, right? Short timers, the people that's like the great resignation, I'm sick of working, they are at elevated risk. Those are the ones that if they can be approached might be warm to taking a bribe or something like that. So, this is, I won't say this is new, but I think this is new in the cyber world where more and more these insiders are being turned. And we've seen this attitude, this change in attitude for, especially Americans about the relationship between work and life. And I think that's got a lot to do with it.
Yeah, we actually the company I was at previously, who shall remain unnamed, actually was subject to a T-Mobile SIM swapping attack. It was a targeted attack, and in this case, they wanted to get the SMS MFA codes off that
Mhm.
particular device to try and get access in. Luckily, the employee was on top of things, realized, hey, something's not right here, reported it, and we were able to get it fixed. So just a further reminder, folks, if you see something, bring it up. Tell all your people. If you see something, say something. That's how we catch things.
All right. Nation state actors.
Yeah, this has gotten crazy. We've always known, well, the nation states that are enumerated as the biggest problem has always been Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, right? North Korea, they're out there stealing money. They steal millions of dollars from banks and crypto exchanges and things like this. China, all about the espionage. Russia colludes with their cyber criminals up to and including destructive attacks. And Iran is basically focused on Israel right now, but we're starting to see their signal more and more here. In fact, There is a local jurisdiction in Washington state that we know was personally hassled by an Iranian group that would not go away. But this is getting bigger now because these nation states can see, this whole thing about asymmetric warfare. You can sit in a basement in Syria and do a whole lot of damage without ever firing a missile. And the effectiveness of that and the low cost has got everybody's attention here. So this is an increasing signal. The number of state actors that we're seeing on the radar are multiplying. And again, to the extent that there's organized crime in their nations of origin, there's pretty active collusion going on. It's not just Russia. You see what it can result in right there. Mostly nation state actors are focused on espionage, especially China. But the bit about disruption, that's starting to become more prevalent, and so that's why we have the terms killware and wipers, right? Things like this that are showing up. Looks like it's ransomware, but all it does is snuff out your network, and they don't want your money. So, any follow up on that?
We're seeing an increase, I think, too, in kinetic attacks, which is frightening. We talked recently about Olmar, attacks on water treatment plants. That was just kind of a fluke. But nation state actors, you have to believe that they are definitely looking into kinetic attacks. What happens if I take a power grid offline? How does that affect our enemies? Because to them, we're the bad guys, right? We're the enemies. What happens if they take a water treatment facility offline or take a hospital offline? I mean, this all started back with Stuxnet, and it's just kind of evolved from there. So it's concerning what the future might hold in that regard with nation state actors, and especially when they leverage some of the organized crime gangs as well to go out and be their foot soldiers, as it were. It's pretty far reaching and pretty concerning at this point.
Yeah, and some of the things that have been showing up in terms of toolkits that have been discovered that are specifically for taking over industrial control systems or SCADA operations, right? These are not script kiddies that pull this stuff together. These are not insiders. These are very focused nation states on, as you say, these attacks that turn kinetic. So also increasing signal. Unfortunately, some of these really do not like the United States and don't have any barrier at all to doing something just purely destructive.
And don't seem to have any barrier to how many people they have working on it. I mean, North Korea, Russia, China, Iran. These are nation states that presumably can have hundreds, thousands of people working on this.
Yeah, and in fact, China's got a lot of people. There's a Chinese activist group that has just reared its head after being off the radar for a while, and this is extremely concerning because the collusion between the state and the actors that you pointed out, if that starts happening in China, and I don't think that's being seen before, we got a big problem on our hands.
Yeah, Robin asked a question in the chat. What evidence do you have of U.S.-based organized crime using cyber attacks to extort money or to make money by other means?
I don't have any evidence of that. I know that signal is there. I rely on the Department of Justice to actually take those people's heads off and throw them in prison if that happens domestically. It's, they can do attribution down to the person of these actors in Russia or North Korea. We can get our own people. And I think, there's a bit of an aversion to doing this out front. However, in the gig economy, if all you have to do is, for example, establish initial access and then back off, you're probably at a lot less risk. So, it's a mishmash of what's going on right now, and it's really hard to tell. We do have those actors. I expect them to end up in jail.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the, a lot of the Americans who get in trouble here, I'll go back to those insiders, right? They let somebody else in, or they do something themselves on the way out, right, Mike?
Or they end up being money mules, and if you didn't know you were being a money mule, Department of Justice does not care. You're going to get prosecuted.
That is
That's
true.
like the insiders too. It doesn't have to even be a malicious insider. It can be somebody that just makes a mistake, that doesn't follow their security awareness training and does something incorrect. Uses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 as their password. That still happens. As much as we've talked about it over the years, we were at DEF CON this year, and one of the stores in the casino, that was their Wi-Fi password.
Oh,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's like, that people have been talked to, but yeah, a lot of times it might not be malicious. It might be accidental, but it still leads to the same result.
Yeah, but if you want that to be a good password, you just make it go all the way to 11, right?
Yeah, right.
All right, activist Mike.
Okay. Activists are the biggest, most worrying signal right now when it comes to down to domestic events in the United States. To me, right? We know we're getting robbed. We know that the United States and the federal government is now in the fight and they're helping with that. This is a wild card because of the ease of use and the ease of obtaining, even as an affiliate and having something done as a service. Anybody that's got any kind of an axe to grind can pull ransomware as a service out and inflict that somewhere. So, a lot of examples of this are all over the place right now. The activists have gone after Russia, like we said. There's a gang in India called the Goodwill Ransomware Gang. What this gang will do is it will hit you with ransomware, and instead of extorting you, they'll say, "I want you to go buy pizzas for poor kids." I'm not making this up. This gang really operates in India. There is an international collective that hacked a whole bunch of cameras by a company called Verkada, put all the streams online. That was prisons, schools, hospitals, right? Just so they could, point out the bad security of these cameras and the privacy aspects of this. Police departments have been hacked and documents stolen and made public all over the place. And again, there is Anonymous and what's going on in Russia and the Belarusian cyber patriots, and they've hacked trains and all those other things that I told you about. And then there's what we would think of more as vigilantes, right? Just doxing people. And you say something online somebody doesn't like, and all of a sudden they throw you under the bus, and there's a picture of your house and your kids' names and all of this stuff. It's crazy. So it's social, environmental, geopolitical. The environmental stuff is really interesting. In Brazil, there is super interesting environmental hackers. Um, you know, the techniques they use are still kind of primitive, but again, everybody is getting up to speed and finding that they can pull the tools off the shelf now. So you get DDoS, you get defaced, your records get stolen and made public, right? They're not after money. They want to punish people. They want to raise awareness. And the tactics they use are, frankly, I don't want to say they're all self-inflicted wounds, but a lot of them involve, people picking dumb passwords or sharing passwords, or being exposed in a password dump that is used to just grind. So those are the activists. Brad?
Yeah, the thing that worries me the most about activists is they, versus say like a gig worker, right? The gig worker is getting paid X amount of money to go hack this box and give the data over. They don't care. They're not invested other than the financial aspect. Whereas the activist, they have a deep-seated belief in that mission that they're working through. They, to them, the end justifies the means. I'm going to, there's some bad officers out there. We can all admit that there's amazing officers. Doesn't matter. They all get lumped in that same data dump. It's not. There's a lot of collateral damage, I feel, with activists, and they believe in their mission. And sometimes I believe in their mission, but a lot of times there's a better way to deal with it than just going out and pwning boxes places. But yeah, that's what worries me the most about activists, though, is just their dedication to that mission.
Yeah. Well, here's what worries me the most. Okay. There are elections coming up. And in our ancient way of conducting elections, and especially how the electoral college votes and things like that, this is true. There are 3 or 4 counties in the United States where if you can swing a vote one way, you win the election. Okay, just right, just the electoral college. That's how it works. So, and in our create your own truth time that we live in right now, it doesn't need to occur that you change the count of an election. All that is required is that you create enough doubt in the validity of the election. So if I can take ransomware as a service and point it at Chatham County, North Carolina, and this is exactly what happened in the last election, last presidential election. I thought it would happen to more counties, but only happened to one, and hit that county with ransomware, it doesn't matter that the election infrastructure is completely separate from the county. It doesn't matter that it will not affect the vote. What matters is the perception created is that the vote can now not be trusted because they got cybered. So this is my big trepidation coming up to the election. And again, you don't have to be elite. You don't got to be a hacker. You just got to have a credit card.
Yeah,
You
and
don't need to.
go ahead, Brad.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say you don't need to change the election. You just need to change people's belief, and then you've got it right there. That's how you win.
Brad, the thing that you said about and this is important, and I also saw that Michael in the chat said, we worry about activists. The thing that you said about these aren't paid people. They're in it for a cause. They don't just end when the day ends, right? They're like, oh, I'm not getting paid for this, I'm not going to do it. No, they're going to keep going. I've been personally targeted by these folks. Neo-Nazis, decided to post a picture of my address and my house. It's a long, involved story for another day, but nobody was paying them. They thought they were doing this great thing, backing a YouTube star. It was back before we had YouTube stars, but a guy who was big on YouTube, and they came after me, and it was amazing. Even after law enforcement got involved, that didn't stop them because they were in it for a cause. It was fascinating experience.
And that's a big thing too that we need to remember is activists are not all just on one side of the political spectrum or the geosocial spectrum. They're all over. I mean, it runs the whole gamut. You have far left, far right, non-political. I mean, it's all kinds of people out there that have beliefs and things. We all do. We all have our own biases and beliefs and things that we want to see. Same with these activists. It really spreads the gamut. So.
Yeah, I want to answer a couple of questions in the chat here. So first of all, Mike Sloan is talking about activists, being one that they lose sleep about. So Mike is in the public sector. And so for sure, being in the public sector, this is something to worry about. Robin's question here is about SMBs seeing, hey, there hasn't been this huge fraction of small businesses hacked. Do I really need to worry about this? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what sector you're in, what kind of business you're in anymore. If you take credit cards, you're regulated. If you have health records, you're regulated. If you produce energy, you're regulated. If you handle criminal justice information, you're regulated. If you're a construction company, you're not. Except now you are by your insurance company. So, is it a waste of time, or is it a waste to invest in preventing and something like this? Well, don't do that. You will not get insurance. And when the inevitable event happens, because the low hanging fruit is easy to identify, you probably lose the farm. So, they may be thinking this is a waste to invest in, but their insurance company is going to stand on their neck.
I'll also say it's embarrassing. For a small law firm, for a medium-sized accounting firm, it's embarrassing to become the victim of an attack. And if you don't have to report it, you don't. And so, Robin, one of the things you said there is, that's how many, you said 85 data breach events have been reported to the state since the beginning of this year. That's how many have been reported, but how many have there been? And I think that's an important point there. Okay, Mike, Mercenaries.
Okay, mercenaries and freelancers, we'll call them. So this is this gig economy. This may be creating more people willing to become hired hackers, right? The whole great resignation and the recalculation of work-life balance and things like this. And the fact that we work in cyber and, we're losing. We are losing. The dark side becomes attractive. So, this is operated by another corporation-like entity that does business on the dark web. Practitioners with specific skills are constantly being recruited. It is somewhat aligned with the organized crime infrastructure we talked about, and the well-connected can buy access to any identified email or a social media account, get interactive access to an asset in the corporation they choose, et cetera, et cetera. So the signal created by this group is pretty well indistinguishable from organized crime. And the reason that we break it out is because it's different. Everybody's doing piecework rather than being part of a gang. So it I don't know how this will stop. I do not know how this will stop. The unhappiness that people have in working in technology and the fact that you can make so much money so easily doing this is so attractive. This is going to fuel a lot of crime. And we're probably going to stop talking about criminal gangs, and it's all going to be piecework, and there will be one person at the top that just kind of does all the contracting. So yeah, they're going to steal from you, extort from you. They're going to disrupt, your network, depending on who the customer is, right? All of these things could happen. So Brad, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that that Mike makes a good point in the chat, and that mercenaries will take work. They don't care what the cause is, as long as it pays the bills. And that's that makes them dangerous as well, and that they really, I don't want to say they don't have morals. They have their own unique set of moral standards that maybe they follow that put us in danger at the end of the day. I think it's going to continue to increase. The only way I see this stopping is if we can somehow figure out who these individuals are and have them brought to justice. Until that happens, again, it's money coming in.
Yeah, I mean, there's an article I read at one point about Africans, I believe Nigerians, trained by Russia. They had a gig with Russia, an exchange, whatever was happening, that ended, and then all of these people have now been trained by Russia,
Yep.
and and can
And that's
go
where a
out and
lot of the
become
fraud is
mercenaries,
coming
right?
from.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Hey, Julie asked a question here with the Lloyd's announcement. That's the insurance announcement we talked about
Hey,
before.
Julie.
Aren't cyber insurance companies getting a huge out? For example, if Russia collaborates with state-sponsored hackers or pays a mercenary,
Yep.
couldn't my cyber insurance companies say that any cybersecurity event originating from Russia is state-sponsored?
Yes. And your insurance company, because they're in business to make money, are going to do that. And so, Lloyd's of London came out and said this. We don't know what the response is from our federal government and the regulators as to whether or not they're going to agree with this or how they're going to set the bar for attribution. Can you prove a nation state was involved? Regardless, there's other things ramping up the pain, and we're gonna stray too far into the woods here, but um, the privacy statutes that are coming out of California and New Jersey and Virginia, all these other places, do not have a requirement that if data on you gets stolen, that you have to demonstrate you were harmed by that. It's just the fact your data was stolen is letting people gather together as a class and have a class action suit. And now there are ambulance chasing lawyers lining up class action suits because of that. So that just how the money is lost and who's going to take the hit here is rapidly changing. And again, I think the federal government needs to get into this and really set some bars as to, if you're going to make this claim, you're going to have to prove it.
Right, and then I mean, there's who is the victim in the crime, right? I mean, the organization, the person, the insurance company. I mean, that's that's what it's that's what it comes down. All right, terrorists.
Gloves are off, can do anything they want. Now these folks are not known for being especially good at this, But again, being able to buy the tools, anonymously, being able to contract, some work and keep your fingerprints completely off of it has not gone unnoticed. Now they are trying to come up with their own capability sets, ISIS, Al Qaeda, Boko Haram, those are bad people. They're not going to steal your money. They're just going to knock stuff down. They're interested in terror, and if you wanted to create, terror on, a local scale, go after a water utility. They're frankly unprotected. If you want to go after economic damage on a large scale, go after a maritime port and stop shipping, so they're calculating these things. They want to do this terror thing, and there's lots of opportunities for it. So can they extort you? Yeah, they can go after your money, but that's not really what they're interested in. Their goals are political and for the most part destructive.
All right, Brad, anything to add on terrorists?
Yeah, no, I agree with the availability of the tools and different services that are out there, like ransomware as a service. I think that tool availability is going to grow, and as that tool availability grows, I think the terrorists are going to be able to buy more of these tools, learn how to use them, bring some people into their organization that might have an interest in cybersecurity or cyber warfare, have them teach the rest of the team. All it takes is one or two folks in that terrorist organization, and they'll be able to start launching these attacks with these readily available tools. So we manage to control the tools. We can help cut down the terrorists, I believe.
Okay. All right, let's try to pull all this stuff together, because that was just a whole lot of talking about, hey, what are all these groups doing out here, and how is their signal going to be different? So here's a reasonably well thought through table here. You're free to disagree with anything on here. This is what was on the preceding slides, but just in tabular format, right? So if you have the ability to ask yourself the kinds of questions that would tell you what kind of group would be motivated to come after you. Got a lot of money to steal? Okay, it's probably going to be criminals. Do you have state secrets, or do you have intellectual property? That could be an espionage actor. Do you take a position on something publicly? Does your business do something that runs afoul of the sensibilities of somebody? There could be activists coming after you, right? So here are reasonably the techniques that you can expect, or the outcomes you can expect if you are attacked by any one of these groups. Brad, you want to agree, disagree with anything on here? Theft is a biggie, you will see there. Terrorists generally not, interested in your money, but they will extort you just to turn up the pain.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think with theft being in almost every category, I think that makes a lot of sense, because each of these groups, they do need money to run on. They need money for hardware. They need money to buy new tools, things like that. So theft is a big one. I would think that some terrorist groups might participate in theft, again, to help fund their mission or their beliefs. But I do agree that it's maybe not as much as the others. I think this table makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I will say theft in this context is not just money, it's intellectual
Yep.
property, it's theft of records or secrets that you don't want public, things like that. Okay, go ahead and go to the next slide, Jake. And we're giving this deck away if anybody wants it, right?
Yeah, we're going to do two things. One, if anybody wants a deck, shoot me an email and I'll get it to you. Second is we're going to post it on our website, and I'll post the URL into the chat here at the end.
And we'll have a white paper to go with this that goes into some detail.
Mm-hmm.
And so here are, tactics, tools, tools, techniques, procedures, whatever the TTP means. So here's what you can expect. So again, if you're worried about losing money and criminals come after you and the outcomes result in the preceding slide, then here are the things that they're going to exploit in general to try and compromise your organization and get at their goal. So, a lot of these things I think are straightforward. I don't know that watering hole attack is straightforward to everybody. What that is, it's rigging a website that would be, or compromising a website that is commonly visited by the group of people you're interested in compromising, and or doing something to attract them to that website or to one that you've set up. That's a watering hole attack. And that's pretty sophisticated. The 0-day vulnerabilities, those are becoming more and more rare, and more the at least initially the domain of nation states only, although they do jump the fence and they end up over there in organized crime land. And we know that because the NSA secrets were stolen, a whole bunch of our tools, by the shadow brokers a few years ago. And right away, those tools ended up, one called Eternal Blue, ended up being used by criminals, right? Our NSA tool ended up being used by criminals. So here are the basic tactics, techniques, procedures here. And in order to kind of tie all this off, so if you are worried about distributed denial of service because activists may come after you, or the unsophisticated criminals of opportunity, engage a service like Cloudflare that will detect and blunt these attacks by dropping, null routing, black holing packets. If configuration mistakes are something that are, that you may know you make too often, use good change control. Make sure that default settings are always addressed, and authentication strength, right? Intentional compromise by an insider. I think, perform a risk analysis of employees that are likely to be an attrition risk, and make sure that monitoring network traffic and endpoints are adequate to see if there's any aberrational behavior. Exploitive remote access, credential stuffing, hey, use that multi-factor authentication. That kind of puts, an end to that. And I would consider a dark web monitoring service for compromised employee credentials as well. If phishing is the problem, right? If the group you're worried about uses phishing as a technique, and a lot of them do, educate your users, and for God's sakes, consider a policy of disallowing personal use on organizational devices. Personal use on a personal device makes a whole lot of that problem go away. If a vulnerability exploit is what your adversary will use with you, monitor vendor and open source information for vulnerability announcements. Treat internet facing, if somebody says, hey, on-premise exchange servers are vulnerable, drop what you're doing. That's an incident. Get after that like it's an incident. Watering hole compromise, use a URL filtering product. Make sure, again, monitoring, and this aberrational activity is something that you can alert on. And if it's 0 days, that's when you really have to invest in the most expensive. This is the Lockheeds of the world. This is what they have to do. Small, medium business, no, that's not going to be your problem. But if 0 days, and you're a defense contractor, invest in the best monitoring and data analytics possible. Ensure that these weird activities, when they are detected, are immediately investigated. So I just ran through this in a narrative way, but this is part of the white paper, and those recommendations are all.
And we'll share it. And one of the things that we provide, and I don't mean this to be an ad, but I'm going to tell a story here because, Mike, on the last slide, you talked about configuration mistakes. When we talk about managed detection response, which is the SOC as a service that we provide. So over here, is your on-prem network, cloud environments, remote endpoints, SaaS platforms. Like, we can see a lot of this. And so over here, when we talk about our security operations center and threat hunting, there is a case where one of our customers misconfigured something, and the SOC in a medical environment, healthcare environment, and our SOC saw the misconfiguration and said, hey, before it became a reportable event, before anybody took the data. There is a lot of those things that a security operations center can see, and a lot of those things that vulnerability scanning and working with a vCISO, Brad, like you, can see, right?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, one of my vCISO customers last month had they built a new router and racked it, and there was a configuration error in it. And it was, I believe, 20 minutes later, the SOC was reaching out and working with them to get that issue corrected. By the time I heard about it, they'd already had it fixed and taken care of. Customer is super thrilled because it kind of saved them. So yeah, very, very important that you are setting things up properly, but then also watching those things after they're set up as well. And something like a SOC can obviously help you with that.
Yeah, and when we think about that service and we think about other things, that we do for folks, obviously, Brad does the vCISO service, but it's all of that, prepare for an attack, detect an attack, and then respond to it quickly is a lot of what we do, and a lot of, and it's funny, on here we don't even have that threat hunting, but that threat hunting finds a lot of that stuff, right, Mike?
It does. We get indicators from all over the place, and depending on where the indicators come from and who observed them first, we will apply those to those groups of our customers that are in that sector. So, for example, we get indicators every week from the Washington State Fusion Center, and that's a lot of local government stuff. And so, all of our local government customers are scanned for any access to what we now know are bad domains and bad IP blocks and things like this. So yeah, the hunting is especially important.
Yeah. And so there's a question in the chat here, that I want to answer, and then we're going to do final thoughts here. MFA is great, but as we saw with Cisco recently, are you worried about MFA fatigue with users and then allowing bad adversaries access?
I'll answer this the way I answered it. There are certain places where multi-factor authentication, just because of that extra step, can result in a bad outcome. So if you are a physician, if you are in law enforcement, you don't have time for that stuff, and that is true. Otherwise, user fatigue, DFC. That's all I can say.
Thanks for that acronym. So two things here. One, I'm going to put in the chat the article, the white paper, that has all of this. That chart that Mike put in there, with the little spreadsheet thing, that's not in there quite yet. That'll be in there later today. But check out that article. Please feel free to share it. Additionally, my colleague Ginny, who puts together all of our events, and thank you so much, Ginny, is going to put into the chat a survey. We always appreciate your opinions on our events. These have gotten better, believe it or not. And it's because of your comments. So please go in there. Additionally, when you take the survey, you can, one, get in contact with us, and two, everybody who fills out the survey, either you can get a gift card for it, or you can donate that gift card to Girls Who Code, which is a great charity, training more people to do the kinds of work that we need to do. And as always, you can call our 800 number 24/7 if you ever need anything, or email my colleague Ellie, if you want to talk to us, if you want to talk to me or Mike or Brad. I'm the least interesting one, but sometimes people want to talk to me. All right, guys, final thoughts here. Brad, you first.
Yeah, sure. I think while there's a lot of bad actors in the world, I think that if we continue to learn and work on attribution, I think that's going to give us the leg up. There's always going to be bad actors of some form or another. We can't just hope that they go away. So we really need to educate ourselves and work hard to prevent them from succeeding in their missions. And with focus and with the proper partnerships, I think we can definitely do that.
Mike, final thoughts.
So yes, and um, really what we need is to start treating our logical border like it is a physical border, and there is a certain standard of behavior that you have to maintain if you cross that point, if your packets cross that point. And if they don't, we should just shut you out. We really have got to start using that analogy if we want to get our arms around this, because we're having our rear ends handed to us. The groups are proliferating. The tactics that they use are becoming more and more common in terms of their sophistication and their ease of obtaining and use. So please, federal government, get with the program.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and thanks for joining us. Thank you, Brad and Mike, for putting this together. Everybody, don't forget to check out that article. Please fill out the survey that's in the chat there, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event.
Yep.
Thank you very much, everybody, and have an awesome day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.